One is a short, sweet, and somewhat generic retelling of the legendary thriller piece. The other doesn't seem to have a synopsis on Wikipedia. Uh-oh. The Most Dangerous Game. They Remade It. And welcome back to another episode of They Remade It. I'm your host, Stuart.
And I'm your host, Jacob.
And I'm in surprisingly high spirits this time around because, sometimes there's a bit of a lag whenever we get back into it between recording sessions, especially when we have delays. But it's only been a week for us since the last one, so this one's pretty easy to slip back into.
Yeah, we're getting right back into the swing of things. We know how this is supposed to go, and I think we're excited to talk about this as well. It's not too terribly bloated, this conversation. Yeah. It comes from a place that we're both at least familiar with, so the story beats are easy to follow for the most part. So yeah.
Beyond that, our lives have been pretty straightforward in the intervening time. We haven't become new grand men. I know I've fallen off my usual tab of talking about the weather and whatnot, but honestly, it's been pretty boring on this end, and I've decided pretty decidedly to stop looking at so much of the newsreel, so that makes my life a lot happier these days.
Yeah, I don't know why you held out for so long.
I think it's like watching a train wreck kind of thing of there's a strange morbid fascination. And also as an adult, I feel like I need to know certain things. And then just more and more things kept happening. I was like, you know what? I'm good, actually. I think I'll die in ignorance this day.
I will gain nothing from this, so why bother?
I will lose everything and gain nothing. So
exactly. But sometimes we do gain things in our life, like new experiences or appreciation for things when we watch that. That's my awful segue into asking you what you've been watching.
Yes. Surprisingly, in the intervening time, I did actually make it back to the movies again. I've been frequenting this local place, a lot more now that I've realized it's there and that's, supporting local, and the way they go about it is very old school. They don't have assigned seats and that sort of thing. It's like, it feels like movies as they used to be, which for me, I actually like a lot more than I appreciate the assigned seats for the fact of just making it easy to find a spot. But the whole reclining chair thing and everything, it never really gripped me. I was like, I'm here to watch a movie. I don't give a crap what the seat is. You can give me a folding chair for as much as it matters. I'm also a decently tall guy. And so even with reclining seats and everything, it's never really felt that comfortable for me. And honestly, the old school seats just kind of fit me better for whatever reason. I never know why. But whenever I do the reclining seats, I feel like I'm just kind of lost in it. I'm like, this is just kind of weird.
I take it you probably like the IMAX theaters then, because they try to cram as many people in there as possible, so you have no options. It's just a chair.
I mean, for as long as it's been since I've been to an IMAX, yeah, I do appreciate it quite a bit. And plus, I don't know. I'm a purist when it comes to movies and everything. My God, I'm probably going to stop going to AMC theaters in general just because of all the crap they put in front of the movies. And between all the different ads for all the different things, and then just, God help me, seeing Nicole Kidman's face every time talking about how we love going to the movies. It's like, you want to know what I love most about going to the movies? Seeing the fucking movie. And I realize now I'm starting to sound like a right-winger talk show host, so I'm going to move away from that level of annoyance. But to that end, yeah, I stand by what I say of it doesn't need to be complicated. I want to go there. I want to have a decent price ticket, and I want to have a seat that isn't going to collapse under me. Anything else is extraneous to me.
I wish I had a nice theater like that, in that sense, or a small local indie theater without having to go deep into the trenches of the city, because I know they have them. But Lord help me, I'm not driving 45 minutes to watch a movie.
Right. Yeah, and ours is right downtown for us, so it's easy.
Sure.
And man, there's such a slapdash operation. Sometimes it's the best. There's a hallway down to the theater there's only 2 theaters in the building, and there's a hallway that goes down to it, and there's no proper doors from the hallway into the theater. They just have blackout curtains that go over it, and they don't always remember to close them. So the light from the hallway will just shine in until one of the viewers gets up and does it themselves. So it's a good time. And this is all just completely just me padding out and just praising my theater, whose name I don't want to give because privacy.
Hey, I've been asking you questions, so I'll let you get to the actual movie now.
Yes. To that end, I did not see a new movie. I saw a they're doing this like book report kind of thing. Like they're doing like a book report, a book club kind of event thing over the course of a few months. And the one they started off the event with was The Age of Innocence.
Oh shit.
The Scorsese flick, which I forgot was a Scorsese flick until we started seeing it, and that popped up, and I was like, "Oh yeah, this is the man himself." I literally had to lean over to Hannah, who was there with me, until I was like, "Oh yeah, by the way, this is the guy who did Goodfellas," and she was like, "What?" It's for those unaware, Age of Innocence is a kind of like is a Regency film of like the classic variety of poignant love affairs and sadness and having to keep up with regal appearances and that sort of thing, but in New York, so not quite technically Regency, but the same vibe. And I liked it quite a bit. I'm not usually a big Regency fan, but there's something to be said about Daniel Day-Lewis as an actor in general. And then it's nice seeing Scorsese stuff. It's nice seeing him flex on stuff that isn't just the wanton violence. Like there are some ones that the wanton violence is really fun, but it's cool seeing him kind of be more restrained. It's like, yeah, it worked out really well for him.
He's really good when he's not pigeonholing himself into the gangster hole. He got in a real sort of mode for a while, I feel, where even if it wasn't explicitly that type of movie, it had a lot of undertones of that type of movie until like Hugo. And then he's like, okay, I'm going to go back to trying something a little different. And then, yeah.
Like every time he does something a bit different, it ends up being like one of my favorite pieces of his, I loved Hugo. Gangs of New York was kind of like the midpoint between Age of Innocence and, well, I guess The Departed. Well, probably more Goodfellas. And so I like that one. I really like because it's kind of doing a different thing. It's just all this stuff that tends to be a bit too steeped in the gangster stuff. I just don't care for. I still need to see Killers of the Flower Moon, but I don't know. Just on a principle thing of how long it is, I just can't care.
It's super long, but it is super good.
Fair enough. And like that period of history is also super interesting. So I just gotta tough through it. But yeah, Age of Innocence was good. Like I said, it's cool seeing him do stuff that isn't just wanton violence. Don't really have a whole lot to say about it specifically. I feel like a lot of Regency stuff tends to kind of blend together. And this one, and like that, nothing really stands out in particular about it. It does kind of keep a consistent, like for people who enjoy Regency, especially, like you hear people in the theater like gossiping and laughing and gasping at like certain moments that to me are just kind of like, oh, he took off his gloves. Okay. And I recognize the love of it. I'm not trying to diss on him on the fan bases of that sort of genre. It's just not necessarily my thing. But I enjoyed it as much as I could have. So that's nice visuals. I like the period history, and it's hard. It was hard to dislike it. That's for sure.
No, that's good. I'm glad.
Beyond that, haven't really done a whole lot else. It's been a little busy here, and basically everything I've been playing is still the same stuff I've been playing since last time. So I've played more Oblivion, and that's mostly it. So
that's perfectly fine. We don't have to pad the opening out ever if we are bereft of things to talk about.
You say as I went on and on about my personal preferences on theaters. But anything special on your end, or?
So I did, like I said, I'm trying to get back into the theater mode again because there was like a month where I didn't go. I think last episode, the French Connection episode, I was like, the last movie I saw in theaters was the Minecraft movie almost a month ago. I've corrected that as a Friday night. However, before talking about that, there was another movie I was going to bring up, and since you mentioned Scorsese, I feel like I have to do this now because I also saw a non-gangster related Scorsese picture for the first time here recently.
Oh.
For the first time, I finally saw The Last Temptation of Christ.
Oh, yeah, I forgot that was Scorsese.
Yeah. Willem Dafoe as Jesus Christ, wandering around the desert. God, it is, I say, as discussing this film, it is so masterfully put together, and the subject matter is so interesting. I really find it hard to get into movies that go over these types of stories, not because the Bible isn't inherently interesting, because a lot of those stories, whether you believe or not, actually are interesting. It's just people get
Yeah.
so caught up in the religiousness of it that they fail to make an entertaining or thought-provoking piece. The benefit of The Last Temptation of Christ is that it's based on a book by a Greek man from the 60s that was highly controversial, and in turn the Scorsese picture was also highly controversial. A lot of theaters wouldn't show it because Jesus is like a guy. You know, he's a
No.
man that does not want to be a prophet. He knows he's being pulled in this direction by the Lord, but he doesn't want to be the Messiah. He feels sin in various aspects of his life because he is still at least partly human. He's with man, a part of man, and so that's the whole point of the temptations. Throughout the course of the movie, he's being tempted to stray from the path by what I think are really interesting depictions of Satan. And it's just it's so compelling. The last 40 minutes of the movie, I can't say really I was like, whoa, what's happening? Because eventually I did figure it out. But like knowing the story of Jesus Christ did not prepare me for where this movie went. And it's not even necessarily historical fiction in a sense, because the beats from the Bible are there. It's just trying to make Jesus like an actual human being, which for all intents and purposes, whether you believe in the divinity or not, he was at least partially human. And that's an interesting sort of internal conflict. I really like this movie.
I will need to check that one out then. That is always a very interesting subject whenever people are willing to explore it, you know. It's just, you know, there's a reason this faith kind of became the dominant one for the last several thousand years. It's worth maybe examining it in a more, you know, in a wider lens. Yeah, that's honestly pretty cool. I need to expand my repertoire with Scorsese because I have such a mixed opinion about him.
Right. He's done a lot of really good genre pictures that don't necessarily, you know, fall into what we would consider his wheelhouse. I really like The Last Temptation of Christ. You mentioned Age of Innocence. We mentioned Hugo. I'm a big fan of After Hours, which is a dark comedy he did, and I like The King of Comedy, which is a slightly comedic drama. Like he does a lot of interesting stuff when he wants to. And to that end, Killers of the Flower Moon kind of has some gangster style shit in it, but for the most part that's not the point, and it's really interesting for it.
But then like one of his most famous ones is probably Raging Bull, and that's about a boxer.
Right,
So,
yeah. I think that was his first movie, maybe even.
Maybe, yeah. No, because like didn't he do Taxi Driver, or was that someone else?
No, he did Taxi Driver. That's right, and that was
Taxi Driver. I'm pretty sure was his first one, or at least it was one of his first big ones.
Yeah, look at us barely knowing things.
Listen, you guys know we're not here as professionals or anything. We're just shooting the shit.
So yes, I highly recommend Last Temptation of Christ. And now that we've gotten Scorsese talk out of the way, I'll move into what I watched at the theaters. I hopped on the bandwagon primarily because I wanted to see it before it left theaters, but I did see Coogler's Sinners in theaters. It was a pretty fun experience. It was really engaging. I liked it. It's one of those rare instances where I think a movie earns its runtime. Because it is long. It's like 220, which for me is long. For a lot of people,
yeah, I mean, for sure.
Shit. But
yeah, I put my general comfortable limit at 2 hours. The farthest I'll push it is 2.5.
Yeah, but like I said, it's fun. There's a lot of people that have been debating whether or not this is a horror movie. Now that I've seen it myself, I'm like, yeah, it's a horror movie. I understand why there's a debate there, but I think it's because the movie fluctuates between a horror genre and an action thriller genre, and it does both of them simultaneously depending on what the mood wants to be. And I think it's pretty masterful at switching between the two without giving you whiplash. And I'm not saying, you know, there are horror elements just because there's vampires, which is obviously not a spoiler. It was all over the trailers. But it's more so because of the tone and the onset of dread that the movie works works towards making you feel. Which
Yeah.
that's unfortunately where my one bigger criticism comes in, is that in the back third of the movie, the latter third, there are some pieces before it goes full scale action movie where you can tell they really want you to feel tension, that sort of creepy dread over a specific scene, and I never feel like they really commit to that feeling because they're so concerned with swapping between the different perspectives. Not the different
Yeah.
perspectives, but the different tonal shifts. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I to that end, I wish there was just a little bit more of that in there, because I don't feel like the concept. I don't feel like it's a really neat concept, and I don't feel like you're getting everything that you can out of it if you're not committing to that part of it. But that's just like really one gripe that I have with the movie. For the most part, I do like it, and I like the fact that we don't really start getting into that stuff until like the 45 or 50 minute mark as well, because
Oh yeah, it holds its hand very nicely.
they really want you to care about these characters, which is important for a horror and a thriller movie, because if you don't care about the characters, then why should you care when they ultimately die?
Mhm.
And
It does.
slashers have built themselves on, like, well, you're just watching this to see teenagers get killed, for example. But I wish more movies of this ilk actually made you care about the characters and their interconnected histories and goals and motivations.
Mhm. I will say it does foreshadowing pretty beautifully. Like just some like early on, like I mean, obviously the opening scene, I won't spoil, basically immediately says something bad is going to happen, and then we have to watch everything build up to that, and you're like, oh crap, something these all these characters we're learning about, they aren't going to make it, are they? Um, and that's not a spoiler. It's made pretty obvious. It's like people going to die, and just like other moments of just like whenever certain characters first get introduced and just kind of light, almost funny ways that they start kind of interacting with everybody. And it's just kind of like the slowly rising tension of, recognizing how everything's going to work out. And like, oh boy. So it's at times very obvious foreshadowing, but it's still done well, which is, a bit different from the movies we watched this time around, but we'll get into that.
Yes. Well, I mean, I can't think of a better segue than that,
Yeah.
honestly.
God, I do love early thrillers, but man, do they just not know how to bring it in easily. From Jekyll and Hyde to no less than the most dangerous game. So, rolling into the synopsis, we'll start off with the original from 1932, The Most Dangerous Game. It is directed by Ernest B. Schudesek, sorry, and Irving Pischel, or Pitchell, not sure. Screenplay by James Ashmore Creelman, and it's of course based on the short story The Most Dangerous Game from 1924, written by Richard Connell and featured in the Collier's magazine, a magazine known for posting a number of either science fiction or otherwise fantasy tales. Its cast is made up of Joel McCrea as Robert Bob Rainsford, Faye Ray, which is a wonderful name, as Eve Trowbridge, Leslie Banks as Count Zaroff, Robert Armstrong as Martin Trowbridge, Noble Johnson as Yvonne, Steve Clemente as one of the servants of Zaroff, Dutch Hendrian as Ahmed, not really sure which one he was, William B. Davidson as the captain, and then 3 uncredited roles of James Flavin as the first mate, Hale Hamilton as Bill, and Landers Stevens as the doctor. Well, Doc, but, we assume doctor. Taking off into the plot, we start off on a luxury yacht sailing through a channel off the northeastern coast of South America. Among the passengers is one big game hunter and author, Robert Bob Rainsford. In discussing the sport with other passengers, Rainsford is asked if he would exchange places with the animal that he hunts. This is what we call foreshadowing in the business. After the yacht's owner disregards the captain's concerns about channel lights not matching the charts that they own, the ship runs aground, takes on water, and explodes. 3 passengers survive the shipwreck. However, a shark attack quickly kills 2 of the passengers as they cling to the ship's floating wreckage, leaving Rainsford as the sole survivor. Able to swim ashore to a small island nearby, he then notices that the channel lights off the shoreline change, and suspects that the ship was deliberately led off course straight to its doom. Rainsford stumbles across a chateau where he becomes the guest of an expatriate Russian count and Cossack, Zaref, a fellow hunting enthusiast, who is familiar with Rainsford and the books that he has written about hunting. Zaref explains that 4 other earlier shipwrecked survivors are also his guests at this time. One Eve Trowbridge, her alcoholic brother Martin, and 2 other sailors, left unnamed. Later, Zaref introduces Rainsford to the Trowbridges and tells them his obsession with hunting became boring until he discovered the quote-unquote most dangerous game here on this island. Rainsford doesn't understand Zaref, who fails to explain any further than that. Eve is suspicious of Zaref and tells Rainsford that the 2 sailors that survived with them have not been seen ever since they visited Zaref's trophy room elsewhere in the building. During the night, when Martin also vanishes, Eve and Rainsford go to the trophy room where they find trophies are in fact human heads of other people that have been on the island. Zaref appears then with Martin's body. Now realizing what prey Zaref truly hunts here on the island, that being people, Rainsford calls him a madman and is resistant. Rainsford refuses Zaref's offer to join him in hunting other human beings, and Zaref tells Rainsford that he must instead be the next prey. Like those before him, Rainsford will be turned loose at dawn, given only a hunting knife and some provisions, and allowed a full 24 hours to roam the island until midnight, whereupon Zaref will begin his hunt. If Rainsford can survive until 4 a.m., then Rainsford wins the game, and Zaref will give him the key to his boathouse so he can leave the island. Zaref then explains that he has never lost his game of what he calls outdoor chess. Eve decides to go with Rainsford, and Zaref tells Eve that he will not hunt her since she is a woman. Real stand-up guy. But if Rainsford loses, she must return with him. Not so much of a stand-up guy. The pair spend most of the day setting a trap for Zaref. But when the hunt finally begins, Zaref discovers the trap and begins a cat-and-mouse pursuit of Rainsford. Eventually, Rainsford and Eve are trapped by a waterfall. When Rainsford is attacked by one of Zaref's hunting dogs, Zaref fires off a shot with his rifle. Both Rainsford and the dog fall off the cliff and into the water below. Presuming Rainsford to be dead, Zaref takes Eve back to his fortress to enjoy his prize. However, to Zaref's surprise, Rainsford returns to the chalet, explaining that the dog had been shot instead of him. Zaref admits defeat and presents him with a key to the boathouse, but Rainsford quickly discovers him holding a gun behind his back. The two then proceed to fight, including a fight with his henchmen, but Rainsford quickly kills them and then proceeds to mortally wound Zaref. As Rainsford and Eve speed away in the motorboat, a dying Zaref tries to shoot off one final arrow from a window. However, he then succumbs to his wounds, and falls into the pack of his frenzied hunting dogs down below, presumably left to become their new prey. Now, jumping into the remake from 2022, also called The Most Dangerous Game. It is directed and written by Justin Lee, and is of course once again based on the short story of the same name. Like I mentioned at the top of this, there is no formal synopsis on Wikipedia that we are so reliant on. However, mercifully, the plot is more or less the same. Actually, in many cases, actually sticking closer to the original short story than the 1932 version. Effectively, though, instead of taking part in the time period just after World War I, that being in the general 1920s, this movie, in fact, takes place just after World War II, sometime in the late 40s or early 50s. To that end, Zaref has been replaced with one Baron von Wolf, an escaped Nazi who now owns this island and uses it for the pre-stated purposes. Our main character of Sanger Rainsford arrives on the island with his father Marcus and a friend who also survived the shipwreck, but the father and friend are very quickly killed off as part of the inciting action. And there is a few other bits and pieces tossed around of how their cat and mouse game goes about, and some details that we'll get into it, I promise. It should also be stated that this movie seemed to be built very cheaply, but again, we'll get there. Its major cast is made up of Chris C.T. Tamburello as Sanger Rainsford, Casper Van Dien himself as Baron von Wolf, Judd Nelson as Marcus Rainsford, Randy Carrick as Rex Allen, the friend from these, who survived the shipwreck, Tom Berenger as Dr. Benjamin Colt, Bruce Dern as Whitney Tyler, Alyssa Dowling as Mary, one of the other hunted, Eddie Finley as Quinn, Kevin Porter as Ivan in this case, and then it just also credits Evan Daughtry, but it doesn't give them a credit of character, so not sure who they're supposed to be. But that's your lot. That's they did not give me a lot of rope to work with on this one, but like I said, it's almost point for point the same as the original film. And also surprisingly faithful to the original story as well. But
We'll certainly get into all of that. It's interesting that we have now encountered this twice in a row with
yeah,
Popeye Doyle and then this Most Dangerous Game adaptation from 2022. I know we've run into it in the past. Like I've said, like War Game: The Dead Code. I had to write my own thing, and but Wolf. At least this makes sense as to why no one
maybe
like adapted or wrote something for this.
at this point we got to start just doing up synopses for Wikipedia. Like how do we start? How do we apply those? Like be like, hey, you don't have something on this. We're two losers who don't have anything better to do.
You can just go in and edit pages if you want. All you need is an account. I mean, I've done that before on Wikipedia. The the Lucy Arnaz show from 1986. It only ran for like 6 or 7 episodes, but I was in there and just looking at the episode list, and I was like, they don't have the directors listed, they don't have the writers listed, and so I went in there and I edited it myself.
Well, maybe I'll do that. I'll have some time on my hands here soon.
While you're doing that, I'll go over Full Circle. All right, not too many here, but that's about to be expected. The first one up, we'll go to Noble Johnson, who in 32's Most Dangerous Game was Ivan, the lapdog of the Count. And in 1924's The Thief of Baghdad, he played the Indian Prince, what I'm sure was a very tasteful depiction. I just don't remember. William B. Davidson was the captain in 32's Dangerous Game. He was also a member of the Citizens Committee in 1932's Scarface. These two came out in the same year.
They did release a lot of crap in like a few year period then.
Yeah, production times were very quick.
Oh, shit.
Phil Teed played a passenger on the yacht in Most Dangerous Game. He was also the assistant director, Jimmy, in 1932's What Price Hollywood, another 32 release. I wonder what year we've covered the most on this show.
I'm starting to think it might be 32.
Maybe.
My God.
When Frankenstein come out. James Flavin played the first mate on the yacht in 32's Most Dangerous Game, and he was Hoatley in 1947's Nightmare Alley.
Oh, forgive me for not remembering who that is.
You don't remember Hoatley? If I remember correctly, he was the first owner of the circus in that movie.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I think you're absolutely correct.
And finally, for 2022's Most Dangerous Game, in the role of Whitney Tyler, was the legendary Bruce Dern. We have seen him once before as Sheriff Ed Galt in 1996's Last Man Standing. But yeah, that is it for Full Circle.
You told me before we recorded today of running into issues that there was technically another recent Most Dangerous Game in the form of a series on Amazon. Well, not Amazon. I think Tubi did it originally, but it was a series turned into like one single movie. And so, like, I saw that one pop up. I was like, wait a minute, we're doing 2022, right?
Uh-oh, what happened?
Which, like, that one almost is worth coming back for at some point for They Remade It Again, just because I really like the premise, but I'm not going to get lost in that one.
Sure. Well, maybe. We'll certainly have to see. Also, I had an itch and I was like, oh, I gotta look it up. Because Frankenstein and Dracula, nope, they both came out in 1931. What Universal horror movie came out in 32? The Mummy. The only one that we haven't done on the show.
My God, you gotta be kidding me.
Of the original Universal monsters.
That's incredible. Well, we know what we gotta do soon.
Yep.
Good Lord. But yeah, I am curious to see where your thoughts are going to go on this, because I have a lot of all over the map opinions on this one. I'm going to be real.
Sure. So this is interesting in that it's the first time in a while, I think, where I had seen one of these prior to the episode, prior to us discussing even doing the episode, because the 1932 version of The Most Dangerous Game I actually watched for the first time last year. In October. You can look at my Letterboxd and see that I logged it back like late October of last year. My thoughts this time around didn't really change. I liked it well enough, but I thought, funny enough, I always complain about movie runtime being too long. I felt the pace was too quick because
Yeah. It should be said, this one's only like an hour long.
it's an hour and 9 minutes, I think.
Yeah. Which honestly, I don't necessarily mind.
No, definitely not. But I feel as far as the story goes, you can definitely feel it in parts. Especially because it takes so long to get to the actual meat of this movie, which this isn't the movie's fault, but being familiar with the short story, I already knew where it was headed. Where I imagine, it would play differently for someone back in the day that may not have read this story in the fucking magazine it was printed in. So I don't want to hold that against it. I liked it a bit more this time around because I paid more attention to the actual set design of like the jungle. And I was like, this is pretty masterfully done. I like the way that this is shot. The waterfall effect that they have going. I say effect as if it was like blue screened in, but it's all practical, obviously. But it looks gorgeous. It really puts me in that sort of frame of mind for a short 1930s black and white picture. But what also helped its ranking this time around is that I chose to watch the 2022 one first.
I see.
Well, I was like, I'd already seen the 32 version, so I was like, well, I'll rewatch that movie for the podcast, but I have not seen 2022 yet, so I'll watch that one beforehand. Boy, oh boy, it's weird because I want to call it cheap, but there are like on location shots with decent camera work where I'm like, were there two different cinematographers for this? Were there two different people filming simultaneously? Because there are other shots and scenes that are just nauseating to look at, and I don't get a sense of what I'm actually supposed to be engaging with. And also, the cast is horrendous. I think Casper Van Dien is the only person actually trying here. Bruce Dern, for as much as a classic as he is, he's in the movie for 3 minutes, and he does not get out of a chair. Like, it's insane, the cheapness of this film.
Yeah, he's one of the people in the boat that we don't ever see again.
Yeah, this is definitely one of those movies that you would find. For all I know, this was like just a direct-to-video Prime movie. I haven't looked up anything on it, but it has the feeling of like secret movie buried in the back bins of a Netflix or a Hulu. That you're just like, what the fuck, Dolph Lundgren in Safe Time? What is this? So
yeah, and I should state, probably full out, because it's going to be, if you've seen any aspect of the 2022 version, it's going to be obvious which one we think is the better film between these two. And I'll state that straight up for the record. Like, yeah, the 2022 one is in many ways garbage.
We did not know.
I do need to say, though, however, this movie frustrates me to my damn core because there's so much of it that I do genuinely like. There are so many individual elements that I'm able to pick up at and point around at, and I think, and taken as on their own, I think are really cool, interesting choices. It's just the problem is that it's all held together with complete garbage, and it frustrates me so bad because I have so many aspects of this that I genuinely like better than the original film, and I'll go through them as we're going through this. But understand that as much as I want this to be a shooting fish in a barrel, I just can't bring myself to do it in many ways.
I would love to hear, not to turn this into a back and forth, but yeah, as we go, I would love to hear what your bonus points are, because outside of what I mentioned, where like some of the shots look fine, I couldn't think of a single thing, unless it's like, oh, that's a neat concept that is executed horribly, which I just cannot look into. The entire time I was watching this movie, I was like, damn, we could have been watching John Leguizamo in The Pest for this episode. It still would have turned out just fine.
Oh yeah, for God's sake. Like, I mean, it's interesting getting into this of all pieces, because The Most Dangerous Game is about as much of the quintessential thriller as we will ever get in Western society. Obviously the concept of like, man being hunted as an animal is nothing new or novel. Like, as long as people have been hunting, that's, I'm sure, has been a concept in at least someone's mind. But the fact that it is so straight up distilled in the original story, which I will say flat out, I read the original story really young. And so that actually, seeing all the parodies that were made of it going forward from there, I actually got to see the original first for once, which is a rare occasion. And I love the original short story. I've read it at a really impressionable time, and just the idea of like this kind of thriller and kind of the time period it's set in, I just adored it. And so I'm going into this with certain biases, obviously, with that in mind. But it's to that end, it is strange seeing where each one decided to kind of diverge from the original text. Not least of which for the fact of why did both of these movies decide they just had to have like the Victorian ingenue lady needs to be saved thing? Like they're fully like in both cases, fully unnecessary to the plot. Like at most, Eve in the original kind of gives some help towards the foreshadowing of the situation. But other than that, she is not part of the film at all. She is just a tag along, and it's purely there to keep up with the whole 1930s, the competent man thing, saving the damsel in distress deal. And she's even less useful in the 2022 version, besides maybe some like light poignancy or meant to kind of make there be some higher stakes other than the fact that an ex-Nazi is hunting this man. I just, in both these movies' cases, I take that as a huge downside. I think both those characters are completely unnecessary.
Mm-hmm. It's funny because I mean, I agree with you. They're unnecessary for the most part. It's just, I'm a big fan of Fay Wray, the original Scream Queen here. Trying
right.
not
of
to
course.
pull too much from love of something like King Kong for the analysis, but I think, and we can discuss if necessary, because I don't want to like nitpick or bully or anything like that. But I do think that the woman playing her in the 2022 version might be the worst actor in the whole movie.
Yeah, kind of.
She is so unbearably sleepy and wooden, even when her brother is basically killed in front of her. I know it not literally, because there's like a whole not off screen, but you know, they're in a different part of the forest and there's like the discussion of a mercy shot, whatever. She is barely emoting.
Yeah, I honestly, Ivan in this case does better than her, despite the fact that he is literally a mute. I honestly, there's not even a whole lot of discussion on that one. I fully agree. She's just fully wooden in this. Like, it does suck how much the acting at times does actually have moments of like decency and like having some amount of like, oh, someone tried a little bit here. And like you said, most of it's on Van Dien's side.
I think he is giving it his all, and he does not need to be for this project.
I will say that, like, and this is as good of a moment as ever to talk about the villain characters, just because that's one of the bigger points I have in 2022's favor. The way they decided to go about creating the main villain in the remake, I honestly thought was kind of genius, because the original Zaroff, like in the original story, he's a Cossack who escaped Russia during the revolution, and in the movie, he just kind of feels like like too much of a cartoon character. Like, you know, Scar and all, and is always wearing black, is always meant to be like the visual diametrically opposed to the main hero who's always wearing lighter clothes and things. And movies in that era do that all the time. I get that. And we've touched on that before. But man, I can never take him seriously. Like how he starts going on about, it's like, oh, the truest thing to be a man is to hunt and then to love. I'm like, my man, you would have loved hanging out with dudes nowadays, popping a brewski, because it's like, man, the thing I love to do after hunting is fuck. I'm just like, this dude is too much, even despite everything going on with this whole premise and everything. But then you go along the side to Van Wolf, who obviously the name itself is just like, I mean, come on, it's silly. It's an absurd level even by this movie's standards. But shifting away from that to this guy was a former Nazi. If I went into a history book and I read that, oh, here's the story about this one Nazi officer who on his estate would hunt people for sport, I would fully believe that, because the Nazis were just like that. And the way they decided to do that with like kind of a slightly more not modernized, but slightly different time period, at least, I honestly thought was a kind of a stroke of brilliance. And I'm honestly shocked I haven't seen other interpretations of this story that haven't gone that direction. Because yeah, they're in South America. They have this private island. That's literally where we know a lot of Nazis ran off to. And obviously they wouldn't have written about that in the original story. It came out in 1924. And so it kind of all just seems to click really well. And even him having Ivan as his beck and call, it's like, yeah, they bullied the Russians historically. I wouldn't be surprised that he basically just had this guy in prison on the island.
So
And it's just, I don't know why. I just love it as an idea.
So, as far as adaptations are concerned, I know the 1945 adaptation of the story, A Game of Death, and the 1956 Run for the Sun, the villain is basically full-on Nazi war criminal.
Okay, I didn't know that.
So at least it has been done before in other contexts. My main
Mhm.
thing is maybe I just fell asleep for part of it, but is Von Wolf actually a Nazi? Because I felt like he was denying it at every turn, and it didn't necessarily feel like he was lying. Did I miss a beat where it was
I don't
actually revealed?
I don't think they ever state it outright, but he does like, and he goes on and on to like they talk about like, you know, the concentration camps, and he says like, oh, that was like a waste of resource and all these sort of things. I think it never states it outright, which I think they maybe wanted to do, but maybe avoided it for whatever reason or another. And I think it's meant to be that he was among the upper echelon, but he was maybe not a true believer. Like he had his own idea of like, you know, idealism or the Ubermensch or that sort of thing. And he maybe disagreed with some of the core philosophies, but you know, if it steps like a goose and it looks like a goose,
See, and at least that's an interesting read or interpretation. And if that
yeah,
was the intent, then shame on the movie for not going the extra mile, because I actually kind of disliked that beat in 2022 because, you know, they were bringing up Nazi just because he was an old German, and he kept denying it, and being against the actual heads of the Reich or whatever. And so I'm just sitting there like, okay, well then why even bring it up if you're not going to commit to it? It's like that comic panel where the Joker is like, I've been working for a Nazi. I'm a, you know, hard-blooded American. It's like, the Joker shouldn't be talking about Nazism. I don't care whether you think he would be for it or not. He should not be discussing it. And so I was just like, if you're not going to commit, why do it?
but all like for me though, it's also I also almost kind of like how they go about it for the simple fact of he clearly has this like personal level pride thing of, oh, I would never be associated with those fools and, you know, in the inner circle and that sort of thing. It's like he's still very much he's you know, he's the kind of person who would be like, you know, oh, I'm not an indie artist, I'm my own thing. I'm not a hipster, I'm my own thing. But like, yeah, they're a hipster, you know. It's like for everything to go on about, it's like, no, I'm the real version of it. It's like, if anything, that makes it worse.
Right. Yeah, I guess I don't want him to outright be in the movie being like, I hate the Jews and that's why I like to kill, or something crazy like that.
Yeah.
But maybe if that is the intention, where he actually is like super Nazi or something, I think I'm on the opposite end of it is way too subtle to be appropriately read. At least for me.
Yeah. I think it is meant to be a thing of like maybe he wasn't a true blue Nazi, but like, you know, for everything he's talking about and everything, it's like the idealism was still lodged in him. It just took a very different shape in this case. Because I think he got out I think he was smart enough to get out when the getting was good. And so like maybe he was, it's kind of thing of like, you know, Werner von Braun himself wasn't necessarily a Nazi, but he certainly bumped some upraised elbows kind of thing. So I'm guessing it's kind of meant to be a thing like that of like, you know, technically no, but you know, he certainly had coffee with him on occasion.
I guess we could just chalk that up to like another failing of the screenplay.
Yeah, for sure. And I will say like it would have been a bit more meaningful if the house he was in didn't look like it was in a shack and just gussied up to be a little bit like a chateau in some capacity. Because my God, this thing, like the chateau, quote unquote, that he had consisted of maybe two hallways, one of which was converted into a sitting room, behind which was a cheap velvet curtain, behind which were the cheapest looking skull props I've ever seen. And it's just kind of pathetic. It's the fact that they could have just rented out an Airbnb in a nice building. Like, what was the problem with that?
When they were in the hut in the woods in the latter part of the movie, like discussing the game plan moving forward, I thought for sure there was going to be a throwaway line of like, oh, his first name is Baron. Because there is no way this guy has any form of fiefdomship living the way that he lives. I guess part of that could be further towards the maybe, you know, he fled Nazi Germany when the getting was good, and, you know, he just sort of took what he could get, and, you know, he likes killing, so he's just sort of set up this establishment and whatever. But how long have you been doing this that you are still in like a hovel in the forest?
Right. Which, like, I think it was meant to be like a nice chateau or whatever, like with passages and stuff, but I truly think it just chalks up to the set design being god awful.
I believe it.
Like, credit where it's due in the original. The chateau was in fact a chateau. I say chateau, it was a chalet specifically, but I'm getting down to brass tacks. The nice place in which he lives. But I don't know.
Good sets.
And then I will also say the actual acting on display, I felt more of a villain from Van Dien as Von Wolf, simply for the fact of he actually does have a lot more interactions with them when the hunt is on. It also kind of chalks up to the fact of there's actually a longer drawn out period of the hunt. I didn't understand why they decided to cut down, like change the timelines in the original, because the original book, so the original story is the remake sticks to what the original story does with the timelines, where the hunt, like the prey is given only 3 hours, and then they have to survive for like as a head start, and then they have to survive for 3 whole days. Meanwhile, Rainsford in the 1932 one gets a full 24 hours, and then he's only being hunted from midnight to 4 a.m. Like, what the? Are you kidding me? That's pathetic. Like, there's nothing thrilling. Like, for me, I was not. I didn't feel any sense of like thrill of the hunt in this one, with the knowledge of like, okay, he's got to like be hiding for a few hours, and he wasted his entire day making this tree fall trap that didn't work. It's like, you could have found one hole, buried yourself with a little bit of an air hole, and you would have been fine, like for 4 hours. Like,
with the exception of the jungle sets and the waterfall sets, the phenom of the original movie here is really all the lead up to the hunt. They're trying to build up, and I'm not saying that the Count is necessarily an intimidating figure, because he's not. No,
not really.
To your point, Baron, the Baron or Baron, depending, in 2022 is a more menacing figure because he seems more unhinged. Whereas we get like a more stereotypical huntsman out of the Count in the original version, like, he would be better suited in a lodge with other people discussing their hunt, which that's an interesting part of 2022 that they fucking flounder on, is these, the people that crash there, he's not originally like lining them up for the hunt. He's trying to get them involved with the hunt. He's like, oh, I've read your books, you should go hunting with me. I admire you and this could be fun. And they're like, you're a monster. So he, kills them. And it's like, okay, whatever. That was kind of interesting. There could be like more of a moral dilemma there, or a discussion, or, betrayal, like a personal hero being disgusted by you taking it to what you consider to be the next logical step. But no, of course not. Why would we do anything like that?
I mean, to be fair, both movies do that. Like, the Count also asks, Rainsford to go into it before he decides, like, all right, screw it, I'll just hunt you instead.
Yeah, but it feels less like it could weave itself into the plot. It feels like they're just hitting story beats. Whereas in 2022, it almost feels like they're actually building to something, I guess, is my point there.
And I think they were trying to maybe make the poignancy of Sanger Rainsford being the hunted more dramatic by having his dad killed off like that, and like kind of having the like betrayal sense of, this guy is just unhinged and he's just, gonna off these guys just so he can make a better target out of Sanger. Which, like, you can kind of see the workings of, which is, God, so much of this movie is just like, I'll start to see like a tiny spark of something, and then it just doesn't go anywhere well with it. It's just like, and that's one of them. It's like seeing Sanger as a character could have been so good, because the original Rainsford in the story, like the short story, he was a larger than life badass. He was all on his own. He didn't have any help. He was going up against all of, Zareth's forces by himself, and he kicks his ass in the end. And it seemed like, like I said, the 2022 one is more closely faithful to the original story for a few different beats. One of which being Sanger as a character at times. It's, obviously he doesn't have the same background. He isn't like a legendary hunter like his original story counterpart, but he still has the whole thing of like, he served in World War II. He was a marksman. He has literally hunted man before. And so it's like, okay, cool. We're seeing like some parallels between him and, the Baron. And I'm like, okay, cool, interesting. Let's see where this goes. And he eventually finds a rifle, and he's able to kind of take up his old position and starts getting back into kind of like a hunter's mindset. And there's so many moments where it seems like he's just on the edge of actually being kind of threatening. And right up to the end of it, when he is able to get the drop on the Baron back in his house, where, like, they have one final battle and he immediately schools him, which honestly I was like, you know what, I can dig that. It's clear that the Baron, when he doesn't have complete overwhelming odds, is a bitch. Um, and there's even a brief moment where he's sitting in the chair where his father died, and he just barely begins to feel a little bit threatening. Like, he's banged up, he's got kind of like the clothes that he's got going on, he's got this guy at gunpoint. Like, okay, cool. I really wish this guy had actually been threatening throughout this entire movie, because otherwise he's a sad wet dog throughout the entire thing. It's so annoying. He just doesn't do anything. He just kind of quietly mumbles to himself throughout the whole film.
That goes back to those odd acting choices. I mean,
Yeah.
he's not as bad as the woman is, but he's pretty close there. And it's I don't know. They get close with his soldier background, making that interesting, but I don't think they ever get anywhere even close to hitting the mark. Like, oh, he knows how to build a specific trap, or he can snipe from a distance and he sort of takes up a position in the woods and the trees, and it's like, okay, I see where you're going with this. But the type of character that Von Wolf is, the type of antagonist he needs to be in this new modern version of the story, because they've painted him as such like a loose psychopath, he falls into the trappings of the original version of this character, where, like, oh, I have a minor wound from your trap, I guess you win the day, I'll go back to the lodge. It's like, that's not the version of this character that I've come to know. I feel like there should be more, soldier v soldier battle of wits in this than there actually is. The Baron is way too reliant on the lapdog too. I don't feel like this version of the character needs a lapdog. Maybe I'm just hung up on different interpretations of the antagonist, but Casper Van Dien's portrayal does not feel like the version in the original story or the 32 movie, at least not to me.
For sure, I definitely agree there. It does seem like he's kind of doing his own thing. But at the same time, I don't necessarily fault certain things like that, because, like, even the thing of, like, him saying, "Oh, I have to," you've won the day because you've injured me. Like you said, that's point for point a thing that happens in the original story. But even him doing that, it's clear he's rattled by it, and it's clear he keeps calling out to Rainsford while he's talking about it. It's like, even in the original story, he kind of just goes like, "Oh, bully chap, that was a good hit. I'll see you later." And this one, he keeps like just going on and on, being like, "Rainsford, come out," and all these things. He definitely still seems crazy while keeping to the original text. And even with that, it kind of also, I think, is meant to be building up the fact of he's not actually that. He isn't a soldier. He is just a rich guy who got bored of hunting jaguars, and so whenever there's anyone that actually poses a genuine threat, he's completely off guard. And to the point of, we see it in the final confrontation where he gets his hand on a knife and Rainsford parries him and immediately guts him inside seconds. It's like, oh, yeah, no, this guy just sucks. It's just that he's so used to having the upper hand in every situation that when he comes up against an actual soldier, it's not even a contest. So I kind of still like the portrayal of it to that end, weirdly enough. And plus, like, when you're playing like crazed sort of maybe Nazi, it's kind of hard not to go into he's just a nutcase all the time.
And that's the thing though, is that maybe I just feel like they don't play with that enough then, or they don't lean as heavily into it, like charging, I don't know, charging into the woods or something. I'm longing for a version of this movie that is not this, basically.
Yes.
And I realize that a lot of my complaints are coming down to it does this instead of this other thing that I think would be more interesting. But
that's half our fucking show, man.
Well, exactly. But it's hard to get past the production faults and the follies of the script in this one. It feels like a gumbo of ideas that don't actually congeal into anything usable.
Okay. Because, like, there's a lot of, like, because there was one moment in particular that just for some reason, I don't know why they decided to go this way in the remake. And I will get back to the original, I promise. But they have the whole thing where they come across the one guy, like Dr. Ben, who survived a previous hunt because the Baron thought he committed suicide by jumping off a cliff, which is a thing that happens both in the original story and in the remake, where at least more specifically in the original, Rainsford jumps off a cliff, like making it seem like he's committed suicide, And so Zaroff thinks, okay, I've won the day. And from there, he's able to sneak back into, like, obviously Rainsford survives and he sneaks into his house, and that's where they have their final battle. For some reason, rather than doing it that way in the remake, in the 2022 version, they have this otherwise unknown character who does not appear in any circumstance other than this movie. We have him having had that exact same scenario where he jumps off a cliff and the Baron thinks he's dead, and instead of it being carrying on from there, he just ends up being an NPC for the main character and girl to just stumble upon, just to pad out the plot. And then the actual ending comes about when the Baron runs off after being fired at and injured by Rainsford back to his chateau, and yet somehow, despite Rainsford being in an elevated position away from him, he manages to get to the chateau first and hold the Baron at gunpoint. He straight up teleports. It makes zero sense whatsoever. I don't know for the life of me why they have done so much else in this movie to stick to the original script, to like the original story. And I will say, to its benefit, I genuinely think the original story has better writing than the 1932 one goes about in a lot of ways, and I'll get into that. But for some reason, they decided to take the final twist and just make it for a throwaway character. Because he basically was a throwaway character. He was just there to eliminate Ivan, which again, in the original book, Rainsford does himself. And it escapes me to no end why they decided to do this, because it makes no narrative sense. It makes no thematic sense. It makes no logical sense to have done it this way. I genuinely don't know why they decided, the biggest moment in the climax of the original story, we are going to completely write it into the background as like it's basically just a reference to how the original one ended. And then have the end with, this guy just teleports and gets the upper hand, and the ending goes more or less the same, other than for some reason now this guy has a love interest and it just is escaping. I'm not even going to get into that. It's dumb as shit. It baffles me to no end of why they decided. You want to know what I actually think it might be? I think it's the fact that I think it's because the budget was so strained on this movie, they didn't want to risk trying to shoot a scene where a guy jumps off a waterfall into the cliffs below. I think they just didn't know how to conceivably do that, and so they just didn't.
That's more likely than most. I'm trying not to delve too deep into just like movie history as a reference point for this, but when I compare like the adaptations of the story for 1932, it feels like changes were made because we were still early in motion pictures, and it's like, okay, we need to change this in specific ways to meet like what we expect an audience to watch, and we need to shorten the time frame because we can't have a fucking epic on our hands, even though that, within a decade that would be shattered. But in 2022, it feels like they're changing things just because people had interesting ideas. And I'm not saying that that's illegal. That oftentimes leads to good places. You don't have to stick to an original source to make something work. Look at The Shining. The problem is if you don't pick a lane or pick an idea to latch onto or just throw things together, like, okay, let's assume for a second that you are 100% correct about the waterfall theory, which I'm on board. I'm not saying I don't believe it because it seems extremely possible. Right. Then when you're writing the movie, just make it make sense. Even just have like, I don't know, a flashback, like he builds a fucking bamboo turret and he was actually in the chateau shack all along. It's like, that wasn't me in the trees. It was some bullshit baseball lobber that I built. Like, I don't care. Do something that is just not nonsense, please.
Yeah, it's God, like everything about that movie, it frustrates me so deeply. And it does not least of which for the fact of there are many moments of it where I felt more engaged than I did in the original, because my God, the original is bland sometimes. It's just like with the cartoonish style of the villain and the fact that like I said, Eve as a character is fully unnecessary. And at times, even the lady in the remake, at times at least, felt like she had more presence in the plot than Eve did. And it, like, for as minimal as it was, at least felt like okay, she has a motivation, But
yeah, she was gonna go make chocolate. Remember?
Yeah,
she's like,
it's like that's
a chocolate
something.
maker. I mean, it was interesting. Yeah. It just then it leads to a clunky line of like, why be embarrassed? Everyone loves chocolate. I love chocolate.
Yeah. And it's like, and like when they also touch on some stuff of like, she like grew up hunting big cats and everything. It's like, okay, are we going to touch into that more? It really didn't, but it's like at least it did try to do something with her. Um, and it's just, I don't know. And I know, like I said, like you mentioned before, so much of the thrill of the original is meant to be the lead up. But you know what? I don't really care for that part. I think the thrill of it's meant to be the fact that it's a hunting movie, and even the original story is to that end. So much of the best moments in the original story were during the hunt. Like and another moment they recreate in the remake, the moment where, Rainsford is hiding off and in one case Zaroff, in the other case Wolf, um, proceeds to find him almost immediately, but then just takes his time smoking or observing the area around him, and before just trotting back off, being like, "All right, I already found you, but I'll give you another shot here. Okay, see ya." And it's just like, yeah, that's awesome. That plays up this villain so well as both a threat and b a pompous prick. It's like, and someone you want to see, taken down a peg.
I
And yeah, it's just you don't really get that in the 1932 one.
yeah,
It just doesn't really seem to manifest.
I think this obviously doesn't apply to all movies of this era, but when you start to go back in time, it really is a fault of a good chunk of that. Not a fault of their own, but a fault of like hindsight and over 100 years of movies at this point. But
Yes.
I think you're correct in that the thrill of the story, the original story, is the hunt itself and worrying for this person and how they're going to survive this entire ordeal over the span of these 3 days. That is the thrill of it. I think 32's the thrill is supposed to be the lead up because it's still the novelty of the picture you're witnessing. It's like, can you
Yeah.
believe this man is going to be hunted for sport? It's outrageous, and it's just like the audience, trying to keep the audience on pins and needles that they're about to see this happen. It's like, oh
Yeah.
man, I can't believe that there's going to be a jungle coming, or so, something like that. And you end up
Right.
finding that with a lot of movies of this era,
No kidding.
where like the
We
concept
we
isn't
watched numbers
shown.
of them.
Yeah, the concept isn't necessarily shown, or if it is, it's very brief. It's the build up to the concept, which is wild. Obviously, looking back again, I try not to. And when I say that I like this movie and I'm pointing out all the things I like about it, I'm trying to do that from an an objective perspective. Obviously opinions play into it, but I'm not like, oh, well, this movie was made in the 30s, so obviously you got to give it all the leeway in the world and rate it 5 out of 5. Obviously, that's not the case. But it is
Right.
interesting to see, sometimes how these devices evolve.
Of course. Then also, and not to immediately add a counterpoint to it though, with Scarface, it was full of action. Shit was happening all the time.
Oh, yeah, I mean, exception to the rule. It doesn't apply to everything for sure. There are
Right, for
always,
sure. It's Scarface. Scarface does kind of stand in a league of its own in a lot of ways.
Scarface doesn't get the attention that it deserves just for some of the inventiveness of shots and editing tricks that they pulled off. Like
Yeah.
I really think that movie should be discussed more. Criterion only just put out a digital release of the 32 Scarface like last year, and I made sure to get
Wow.
it. I was like, wow, this is like number 1162 or something of your library.
Yeah, it's man, I just God, and I feel like I've rambled so much about, especially about the remake, and it deserves it because it's all over the damn map. But it's so. I really was. This is another one of those situations of I had no idea that the remake was going to be so crap. And it is. For as much as I hefted some amount of praise on it, it just doesn't work. And there's so many other scenes I wish I could talk about at length, like the World War II flashback scenes, which honestly harken back to the Easy Rider sequel, if you remember that.
Yeah, they're
with
like
all
in
the
a weird
terrible
blue light, like it was a part of a Tales from the Crypt episode. It was very strange.
yeah. And it's like at times it seemed like it was sort of going somewhere with it. And again, like I liked the idea of the main character literally himself having hunted man technically before, and how like that could work as a parallel and how that'll work to his advantage and that sort of thing. But then it just doesn't really come together in a way that meant anything. Um, and it was such a disappointing watch, not because of like anything, it's because I so desperately saw so many things in it that I think were really good ideas, and so many different moments where I thought, okay, this person's starting to shine through, or this concept's starting to shine through, and that just didn't. And I don't know. I imagine I'm seeing more out of this than I should, and it really is a pretty garbage movie. But at the same time, was also just kind of bored in the 32 one, which, like, again, I know based on the time period, it's we've seen so many movies at this point from that era, which are all just the damn same. It feels like every single ending is the same, of like the same musical swell and sting as the hero survives and the lady's on his arm or whatever, and just all the very direct, like, near nods to camera at times. Like, the foreshadowing at the beginning of the movie is so desperately blunt, it's painful, and it's just I it's obviously the better movie, but I couldn't even tell you it was a good movie on my end. I I wish I liked it more, but I just don't. And that's kind of the case for the 2022 one, but for a different reason.
Yeah. I mean, I'm in a different spot. I think I have a higher tolerance for movies from the 30s.
Which is fair. And I feel like I should, but
I mean, it's that's part of the analysis of the podcast. You know, we don't always have the same thoughts or opinions or likes or goals, and that's perfectly fine. Like, you don't have to like
right, yeah, of course. And I'm not expecting that, of course. But it's just like, man, I wish, you know, I wish so many things had been different about both these movies.
Yeah.
Because I adore the original story so much. I mean, that's why I picked these movies. And at the end of the day, it doesn't feel like it's that hard of a thing to do. I mean, my God, Codename Kids Next Door did an episode that was just a straight rip of The Most Dangerous Game. And it was awesome. But I just, in both of these movies' cases, I'm just like, how do you mess this up? It is the most distilled version of a thriller you will ever get in Western history. It's so easy.
I mean, it is an easy. I mean, the Simpsons. It's Always Sunny. Like, I mean, this is a well that's very easy to go to, and it should be hard to mess it up. But what do you know? But I mean, like I said already, I found the 32 one fairly engaging. I think that the main fault that I have with it is how quick it can feel at times, like it's trying to rush through exposition, because I don't know why it's as short as it is. I mean, movies weren't. We weren't really getting epics or anything around this time, but it's not like every movie was an hour or shorter in the 30s either. Like, I'd say an hour to 20 was still like a regular standard, unless it was a studio edict.
I think maybe it was trying to harken to the fact that the original story was also a short story. I think also, like, on a realistic level, like, I mean, how far can you truly stretch that concept out? I think, honestly, you could comfortably get the entire story inside of an hour. Maybe a little bit more if you want to try to exposit some, but it has to be expositing well, looking at 2022.
Well, definitely, but I think that's a task on the screenwriter and whoever's adapting the story to flesh it out. And yeah, I mean, 2022 is like an hour 35 or something like that, and I mean, they're definitely trying. And to that end, I think that with the exception of The Man Living in the Woods, I think that a lot of the ways that it expands on the premise makes sense. It's just they don't amount to much of anything. But yeah, I like the 32 one. It's hard for me to find anything to enjoy about 2022. I was not bored in the slightest, because I was like, what the fuck is this? Like, I could not at all look away from it. And I'll acknowledge, points of it that I think could be good, but I can't even say that any of the ideas that might have a semblance of being good are actually good in the end, because I think the execution is just all around terrible.
It's like, I don't even know how this movie got made. Like, I never heard anything about it until you brought it up that it was an option for one of the episodes, or the fact of, like, its budget is clearly so non-existent. Like, the camera quality is crap, the voice quality is weird, the acting and the writing is just god awful. And I don't know, I just don't know how something can get so far along with just nothing. And the fact that it's a movie about the most dangerous game, like, that's a well-known story. Like, I feel like getting that off the ground for a piece isn't too hard. Again, not least of which mentioning the fact of there was at least briefly a TV series of the same name that explored the concept in a fully modern setting. It had Liam Hemsworth as the lead, and one of the major characters was Christoph Waltz.
I mean, like, he's the guy whose image you see when you go to the IMDb page for that thing.
Right, yeah.
Like, it's the
and so it's like, and like, it's got decent ratings. It's not like over the moon or anything. And it clearly seems like it wasn't the most expensive thing in the world, but it definitely had a better budget than this. It's like, it was being done. It was done 2 years prior to this movie, in fact. But it's just like, I don't know. It just seems like we've talked about, at least briefly in the past, about like why or how we think movies got made. In this case, I cannot fathom what had to happen for this movie to come together? There is a single line in the Wikipedia about its production. It just says the film was shot in Koenig Pictures backlot in the Pacific Northwest in November of 2021. That's the only thing.
I
And
mean,
then the release, it just says film was released in theaters and digital platforms August 5th, 2022.
okay, well,
Like,
I'm
what?
assuming that's a fucking lie because I was going to the theaters. It must have been a limited release because I was already going to the theaters regularly in 2022, and I saw nothing about this thing. This has the stink of Amazon original back burner money fire. Like this does not seem like a theater movie.
There's 4 production companies on this thing. Koenig Pictures, Quiet on Set, Cherrick Productions, and Greenfield Media. I don't know what any of those are. They don't even have links. They don't have hyperlinks on Wikipedia. They're just written in there.
Well, that's a thing too, is that I know that you did the research for the episode. This is an episode you produced, so you probably have her name in front of you, but a lot of these actors don't have pages either. Like, I kept referring to the woman in 2022 as the woman because the script that I run to pull cast lists did not pull her name alongside several other of the cast members in 2022.
I'll say that also I'm realizing something. First of all, the woman, her character name was Mary, and the actress was Alyssa Dowling.
Okay, thank you.
But one thing I also just noticed was the character Rex Allen, who is the other character friend who survives the shipwreck. His name is Randy Cherrick, and I just noticed that one of the production companies is Cherrick Productions.
Uh-oh.
So I think me smells a bit of nepotism in this strange plot.
Well, either nepotism or that's just the guy.
That's just the guy. Again, he also does not have a hyperlink, so I couldn't confirm unless I just did digging on my own. But yeah, no, like literally, like Alyssa Dowling as Mary doesn't have one. Eddie Finlay as Quinn doesn't have one. Kevin Porter as Ivan doesn't have one. And then just again, Evan Daugherty. It's not even Daugherty. It's Daugherty. So
Dougherty.
Dougherty, I guess.
I've seen that as Dougherty, but it could be like Doherty or something.
Right. But yeah, like it doesn't even give a character for this person, so I don't know who they are. And again, no hyperlink. So like,
what was the actor name?
Evan Dougherty.
Okay, yeah, my script did not pull that person. It did pull Edward Finlay, but he didn't play Quinn. According to my script, he played Quinlan.
Oh, it just says Quinn in here.
What a fucking mess.
Oh my God, yeah, I'm sorry. I just had to look up who the hell Evan Dougherty.
Sure. While you're looking that up, listener, if you would like to hear a list of all of the movies that we could have done for the Most Dangerous Game that weren't 2022, A Game of Death, Run for the Sun, Bloodlust, Turkey Shoot, Deadly Prey, Hard Target, Surviving the Game, The Pest, The Eliminator, The Deadliest Prey, Ready or Not, The Hunt, and Apex. That is a huge list of 13 movies that we could have done that weren't 2022. And I'm sure that this is only a section. I'm sure there's other movies that were adapted from The Most Dangerous Game.
I will also say some of those listed, because I went over that list as well at one point.
Some of them are loose.
I was going to say, yeah, like some of those, it's basically just the concept of what if you were being hunted by other people, which like at that point we could throw in most slasher films. But I get what they mean at the very least.
Yeah, there's always a specific premise set up with it for inclusion. And I mean, we have done looser on this show before, so.
Also, and I'm sorry if this is just truly ground it all to a halt, but I needed to know anything about it. I've looked up Evan Dougherty. He has basically all, at least on IMDb, most of his stuff is for writing on a few movies. He directed 2 smaller pieces, mostly one is a short film and the other is some TV miniseries. And he was a producer on this one, I guess, movie or show called Witch Hunt. There is no mention of The Most Dangerous Game in here anywhere.
I wonder who added that to the page. Was it him?
I maybe, because like I don't like what does he have anything to do with this? I'm losing my mind now. It's like what the fuck is going on?
And it's okay, ground to a halt. Like this is the show now. We are delving into like some of this seems sketchy, honestly.
Yeah, like everything I'm finding. Everything I literally just searched Evan Daugherty, The Most Dangerous Game. Everything I'm finding is basically just stuff that's pulling straight from the Wikipedia page again, which just has his name. Okay. And like there's nothing.
Moment of truth. No. Oh my God. Yeah, no fucking joke. I have the movie playing I have the credits of the movie playing on my second monitor right now. He is not in
Uh,
the credits. If he is a character in the movie, he is uncredited because he is not in the credits of the movie. At least not the cast list.
okay. Okay, cool. I am going to maybe send a request to Wikipedia to remove his ass from the cast list, because what on God is happening?
You can just do it yourself. Wikipedia is...
Well, I don't have I need to make an account properly, but
I mean, yeah. Fuck, I'll just do it. I have an account.
screw it. And I honestly might do up the plot synopsis for this, because like at this point I'm too invested. I know nothing about any of the production or anything, but this at least deserves a synopsis.
I'm just this podcast has gone completely off the rails. I'm literally just letting the credits roll on my second monitor just in case his name jumps out as like colorist or something.
It's just, my God, like, and like, I mean, truly, what can further be said about these films? I mean, for God's sake, we even talked about the fact that both these movies are short. Not even the 2022 one, for all the extra crap it adds. It's only an hour and a half, and again, the story itself is such a simple story when you get right down to it. So it doesn't need to be that long, and our opinions don't need to be that complicated. And yet, I somehow found a way with this dog shit 2022 piece.
I mean, most of our opinions here at the end of the show have just been discussing disastrous production cycles, and I can now confirm that man is nowhere in the credits, not just the cast list. So we can put that to bed.
Cool. Get him out of this damn cast list, because he is not in this movie.
Who is this
in
man?
any capacity? Like, my God.
I don't even know if this is the same guy as the IMDb. I don't know who this is.
Yeah, I don't know. We are. My God, we have. What was that comment again? It's like, who would listen to these gross losers? This is what it feels like. These gross nerds. Yeah, it's like I get it, commenter. I fully understand. I don't fault you at all, because this is what we're doing with our time.
Yeah, this seems fully insufferable. I would not put it past anyone to not want to listen to this.
Yeah, it's just our strange little delve into the weird world that is this movie. To be clear, the original's fine. The remake sucks. Like, that's all that needs to be said.
Oh man, yeah. You can refresh the wiki page now. It's fixed.
Oh, thank God.
Listeners, I did that in real time.
Yeah, my God. Yeah, no, sure shit, it's gone. That's incredible.
Boy.
You know what, Jake? You and I, we made an impact today. We changed the world in the smallest, most insignificant, no one will ever notice way.
Yeah, for a movie that no one cares about.
I truly could never be prouder. Like, the greatest things I will do in my life, I hope, are never put into a history book.
Oh, man, do you have any questions at all for this?
I mean, truly, what could we, like, literally anything I could ask about this, to the capacity of like, oh, if you wanted an interpretation of the story, what would you want? Literally, like, every piece of media ever has done some variation of this story of man hunting man. It's like, there are entire shows and horror stories and everything that have this as a background piece at most.
I mean, I was going to ask if there were any short stories that you knew and really cared for that you wish got the full motion picture treatment. Like, just in general, if you had any thought. Like, my first thought was Gift of the Magi by O. Henry, and I did a quick check to see, was there a full movie release of that? There was one, but it's a fucking Hallmark movie, so it does not count. I want a theatrical Gift of the Magi. I don't care how you stretch that out into an hour and 40 minutes. That's not my job. That's yours.
Right.
There you go.
Literally, the only one I could think of actually did get a production piece of it very famously. And it wasn't a full theatrical, though, but it was An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, which then became an episode of The Twilight Zone, the original Twilight Zone. And the original story, I loved, and the episode in The Twilight Zone, I also loved. It was actually really well done. It's like, that's truly the only one I could ever think of, because, like, I mean, obviously, we've all gone through middle school or high school English class where we read something supremely fucked up, and, you know, the big one that most people refer to is The Lottery. But
yeah.
I think at this point, most of those, like, really iconic short stories have had some kind of interpretation at one point or another. There was one I read that stuck with me for some reason. I couldn't even tell you the name of it, but it's some, like, pastiche of America in the future where, like, 100 new, amendments are added to the Constitution that basically mean that everyone in America can't be any better than anyone else. It's like anyone with anything exceptional about them has to be downplayed. Like, if you have a beautiful face, you have to wear an ugly mask. If you're a fast runner, you have to wear weights. And I'm pretty sure I only recognized years later that it was an extremely thinly veiled diss at communism. And, like, the whole thing, like, ends with this one character who's, like, the truest, strongest, bravest American of them all, who can do all these incredible things, and he comes in on live TV and is like, release your shackles and be true, good, pure men that you are. And then he immediately gets shot, and like this whole thing, it's meant to be like this dark ending and stuff. But it's like, it's kind of just silly. And I'd like to see a production of that because of how silly it is. Because the concept is so stupid.
Look, you came up with an answer.
Wow, I'll be damned.
And I mean, hell, Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge would work too, because the only actual movie adaptation of that was a silent movie. Let's get some dialogue up in here. You know?
I guess so.
Two good
there was
pieces.
I mean, there was sound in it, just they didn't have any speaking.
Oh, is that the case? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's if there is speaking, it's like it's no like true dialogue or anything. It's all meant to be like interpretive. And
Sure.
plus, like I said, it was just an episode of the Twilight Zone. So
Right. Well, I'm familiar with the American Dad episode of that too. So.
oh, well, fun. Oh, this has been an odd one. We've had some before that like we've rambled on, but this one I feel like is the most like energetic I've been by the end of it, where I'm like, this is all crazy. Like I love this story so much, and it's so annoying how both these movies did it for me.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely the best energy to go into socials with, though, I think.
Please, my God.
So go ahead and like, follow, favorite us on all your favorite podcasting platforms. We're on the like of Apple Podcast, Spreaker, Podbase, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, YouTube, but we are hosted by not Stitcher, but Spotify for podcasts. Yeah, send us an email, theyremade@gmail.com, with suggestions for future episodes, thoughts on what we could do better, what we could improve on, what you don't like, short stories that you'd like to be seen made into full motion pictures. What do you think about this mysterious 2022 movie man that's not actually in the movie? Send us an email. Let us read it.
Do love to hear from y'all, for as even the negatives, as we will continue to reference.
Yes. And finally, go ahead and follow us, theyremade.bluesky.social on, well, Blue Sky, for updates on when episodes of the podcast are going live, promo art, posters, things like that for what we've been playing, watching, reading in the downtime between podcast records. Potential things that we could do in the future I'm always posting about, and videos that are full circle representations of people we've covered on the podcast more than once. And that's it for socials.
And I feel the need to send us off on just one last piece of insanity that I just came across. Out of curiosity, after mentioning Mr. Randy Carrick and the connection with Carrick Productions with the 2022 film, I decided just to Google him and, just to kind of see the connection. To my knowledge, it seems like Carrick Productions is just his personal company in whatever capacity, because I was able to find randycarrick.com, which is just a page talking about him, like presumably it's his own promotion. And one of the things at the bottom and all like throughout the top, but just finding a list at the very bottom, it has just above like the page for contact and everything. It has a list of his accolades and things you can click on individually to kind of see, presumably, his CV on each of these things. In order, the list is producer/actor, speaker/author, entertainer/MC, and hypnotherapist.
Well, what can I say other than good night, everybody?
Good the hell of night, everybody. As always, I am your host, Stuart.
And I'm your host, Jacob.
Be sure to look up Mr. Randy Carrick for all your hypnotherapist needs.
So my brother and I, we were gonna go to the East Coast to start a business together.
Entrepreneur. Okay. What kind of business?
I make chocolate. Seems ridiculous now, but
Who doesn't like chocolate? I'd kill somebody right now for some chocolate.